In this video, I'll be looking at the laddered 4 dungeons of the game, so if you missed the first part, you can check it out here. Alright then, let's get to it. Stronger entry into the Link's Awakening dungeon slate here, and level 5 Catfishs Maw's combat focus provides a welcome change of pace. Early on in the dungeon, you encounter what appears to be a mini-boss in the Stalfos Lord, but after a couple hits, he runs off and pillages the dungeon item. From there, the rest of the level becomes a long cross-dungeon game of cat and mouse, with your goal being recovery of the unknown item, which will allow you to traverse the large chasms found throughout the dungeon. This chase leads you through all 4 corners of Catfishs Maw, and I like that sort of back and forth movement through the dungeon, and the multi-part duel. It really enhances exploration, as in addition to searching for keys, chests, and the like, you also have to hunt down Stalfos Lord to continue your battle. When you finally defeat him after your 4th duel, he drops the item he's been carrying around all along. The hookshot. But not the normal harpoony hookshot from Link to the Past, not the ching 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 ching. No, this is a massive rocket-powered destructo cannon with a chain.
Boosh!
Deals out more damage than the level 1 sword and pulls you across rooms.
Boosh! Boosh!
Normally the hookshot is like this little arrow thing, but this mace is bigger than Link's body. Anyway, once you get the hookshot, you have to go back and re-explore the entire dungeon, as by this point you've been in most of the rooms and therefore can't just coast on the map to each room you haven't gotten through yet, but have to actually look around and find where the hookshot can help you. While I'm generally a fan of revisiting former locations in games, the way it drags you around the dungeon to chase down Stalfos Lord is executed well enough that even backtrack haters shouldn't feel too much cause for protest. But even after facing Stalfos Lord 4 times to get your hookshot, you still have the actual mini-bosses, 2 Legend of Zelda style Gomas at once, and then to top it all off, one of the hardest and perhaps creepiest nightmares in the game in Slime Eel. I'm not really focusing on bosses for this list, but Catfishs Maw is all about the combat.
Boosh!
Face Shrine has always been a little hard to pin down for me. For whatever reason, it never stands out in my mind much other than the heavy elephant statues, and therefore I always enjoy replaying it because I usually don't remember the layout very clearly. It has a lot of sort of long, winding paths without much overlap, and it's easy to find yourself multiple rooms and stairs into a certain path only to find that you needed to bring a key along. In that way, this is a more labyrinthian-style dungeon than a combat-focused one. If you know what you're doing, the bare essentials of this dungeon could be accomplished fairly quickly, but with bombable walls, lengthy paths that lead to locked doors or blocks, and an unprecedented amount of optional chests and even rooms, it's quite easy to deviate from the essential progression. I mean, there's over 500 rupees worth of treasure in this dungeon. With the first appearance of Wizrobes, an endless loop section, and peg puzzles, the Face Shrine does increase the difficulty by a notch or two, but loses major points with another unchallenging nightmare. Seriously, Link's Awakening is terribly lacking in the boss department. I also have to take issue with the item. Even at face value, a stronger power bracelet sounds cheap, but compound that by the fact that literally its only function is to lift these elephant statues, which appear nowhere else in the entire game. Basically, it might as well have been a spray bottle of elephant poison and made no difference. I do enjoy this dungeon, but it doesn't really offer anything to catch the eye, and overall I'd have to call it a weaker entry into the series. I like this guy though. Eagle's Tower is far and away the most celebrated dungeon from Link's Awakening, and I've no intention of disputing that consensus. It's just a masterfully executed dungeon. The first thing you'll notice about Eagle's Tower, other than this, is the custom eagle statues instead of cycloptic slimes or these dark nut guys. This is one of the several traits that suggest to me that special effort was put into Eagle's Tower, more than the other dungeons. That, along with the fact that this is the only one in the game that features cutscenes and map altercation, multiple interconnected floors, evil Kirby's, and an item that you can carry through multiple rooms. It's almost like they designed it at a different phase in production than the other dungeons. Anyway, the central elements of Eagle's Tower are hitting crystals to raise and lower different orange pegs in the floors, and throwing around a giant steel ball to destroy the 4 stone pillars in different rooms, thereby knocking down an entire floor of the tower. In my opinion, both of these elements present the most mind-bending puzzly gameplay in the game, and combined, they really bend your brain. You have to keep leaving the ball behind while you go down a floor and come back up a different staircase to fetch the pillar killer. Even things like walking on top of raised pegs, which normally you'd think of as a sort of oversight, is a necessary mode of progression, and the fact that the floors are connected means that falling through a hole doesn't simply replace you at the beginning of the room, rather you'll fall to the room below. The bosses are somewhat interesting as well, as a rare instance of micro-continuity put this bird aficionado in control of both these seagull monster mini-bosses and another marine bird in the final nightmare, Albatross, or Evil Eagle in English. Like I said, I totally understand why it's become a fan favorite as the most memorable dungeon from Link's Awakening. The only complaint I have about this one is that it seems that there are quite a few rooms with little to no purpose. The top floor of the dungeon in particular feels very bland as you make your way to the final battle, though it is perhaps worth mentioning that this is the only top-down area in the game with Goombas. Other than that though, Eagle's Tower is a great experience of tight, challenging, and original dungeon design that really pushes the series forward with ideas that would influence future games. While it may only have one floor, level 8 Turtle Rock is the largest dungeon in Link's Awakening in terms of room count, beating out Eagle's Tower by just a couple more rooms. Actually, as I've thought about it, I've seen a lot of contrast between the two final dungeons in Link's Awakening. Whereas Eagle's Tower is a progressive move to fresh dungeon design, Turtle Rock feels very much like it's looking back on the series, harkening back strongly to the dungeons of the original Legend of Zelda, with single-floor design and challenging fights in every room. Essentially, Eagle's Tower is puzzle-focused, as foreshadowed in having to seek out the Eagle Key, and offering a defensive item in a way that almost feels like an afterthought. Turtle Rock, on the other hand, is combat-intensive, as demonstrated by its unlocking mechanism coming in the form of a battle rather than a key, and pits acquisition of the offensive game-changer Magic Rod as central to your progression as a reward for defeating the mini-boss, in the fashion that would be taken by most of the subsequent games. That's not to say that puzzles aren't an important part of Turtle Rock, because it is a difficult maze. It's just that the combat is a more pervasive feature. While Eagle's Tower presented a little sub-story with an interesting mini-boss to nightmare flow, Turtle Rock brings back the mini-bosses from 5 of the previous dungeons, but they respawn this time, along with its own original but silent mini-boss, and a very forgettable nightmare in Hothead. I think this contrast is really genius, and is thanks to that setup that neither of the final 2 levels of Link's Awakening risk being overshadowed for me. This one really brings the expectations for a final dungeon to the table. It's got lava, sneaky flying bat guys called Vyres who spit fire at you, the previously mentioned assortment of stronger enemies, secret bombable walls that must be found in order to progress, an overpowered weapon to obtain, and long, convoluted paths. The mini-boss, Blano, is unique in that rather than try to hurt you, his Mega Punch instead sends you back to the very beginning of the dungeon, making you have to trek through it all again. When you do defeat him, there's a good chance you won't have hit the solitary switch orb thing in the entire dungeon in order to lower the pegs between you and the magic rod. I hesitate to even say that much because I think it's basically expected that the pegs will be raised the first time you get to this room, and I hate to spoil the intended dungeon experience, but oh well. By the time the average player has finished this dungeon, you'll probably have wandered back and forth and all around countless times over, and overcome so many puzzles and challenges that when you defeat the lame Nightmare and claim the Thunder Drum, you feel a real sense of triumph, and will probably never want to visit that corner of Koholint again. So, while it may not be quite as memorable as Eagle's Tower in terms of innovation, I think that Turtle Rock brings just the right kind of atmosphere, challenge, scope, and payoff to satisfy as a final dungeon. If only the boss was a little harder. He does pack a punch, but since it's easy to get the first shot on him, and he doesn't go out of his way to land his attacks, it doesn't really amount to much. Nevertheless, the overall product that is Turtle Rock is a fitting send-off for the dungeons of Link's Awakening. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this walk down memory lane as much as I enjoyed making it. Maybe another time we can talk about what really makes Link's Awakening so impactful, but for now, this has been the Green Subrosian signing off. Thanks for watching.